Hello, this is Keith King from Esri, and I'm joined by my colleague Jim Barry. And today we're going to talk about the system of engagement for rail. So let's get right into it. I want to start off with three key points about the system of engagement. And that first key point is that the system of engagement is about delivering applications to help individuals do their job better. We're going to talk a lot about apps as we go through this presentation, and when we do, what I hope you'll think about are the types of applications that we use on our personal smartphones. Those applications are easy to use. We don't have to read a manual. We don't have to go to training. We just download them and use them. Well, that expectation is now moving into the workplace as well. And the system of engagement allows us to deliver these targeted, focused applications designed for individuals in their individual roles to help them be more efficient, make better decisions, and just do their job better all around. So that's number one, delivering apps to help people do their job better. Number two is allowing folks to get to their data faster, the data they need for their job on a day-to-day basis. Our goal here is 3 clicks or less. 3 clicks or less, whether the person's sitting in the office or they're out in the field on their mobile device. Now, we can't always accomplish that, but that's what we strive for, is to allow people to get to that information faster. And then finally, the system of engagement helps you get more value out of your existing IT investments. It's not a replacement strategy. In fact, what it does is it actually brings these existing systems together by leveraging the location component of your data. And if you think about it, most of the data in rail has a location tied to it. And that's what GIS is built to do. It's built to manage location data. So instead of replacing systems, what we do is actually get more value out of them. And that's accomplished when we start to bring them the systems together and integrate the data, analyze the data in new ways, and present it in context for the individuals and their individual roles. Now, I mentioned that apps are a really important part of the system of engagement. So what I'm going to do right now is turn things over to Jim for a couple of minutes, and he's going to give you some examples of the types of applications that we're talking about here. And this will just be a handful sample of the many hundreds of applications that are possible. But with that, Jim, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Keith. Yeah, let's take a look at a few apps. This first app here I'd like to show is an interesting way to view rail data. When we think about maps, we most often think that a geographic view using some type of appropriate map projection is the way to go. After all, a map is supposed to be a two-scale representation of the world as if seen from above. And when it comes to the many needs of railroads, a geographic view like you see at the top is most appropriate. Very often we want to see the railroad information as it relates to the rest of the world, to scale. This helps us quickly see the location of trains, wayside equipment, grade crossings, and such as it relates to areas trains are passing through. This can help during maintenance operations, getting the right crews to the right places, and so on. There are, however, times when a geographic view isn't needed or isn't the most effective way to manage spatial relationships. Very often, a schematic view, one where quickly understanding relative positions of trains to each other and to stations and to other equipment is more important than, say, north being up or everything being the perfect scale. And in this middle view here, a schematic representation is also included. In fact, this type of schematic view is very often common to railroad track charts, and it's quite often managed on paper, or when it is managed digitally, it's usually in a more static format, say with some type of graphics package, with the end result being periodically printing these things out and distributing them. What makes this particular app useful is that the geographic view and the schematic view are tied together. An off-the-shelf product from Esri called Roads and Highways contains tools that can be just as usefully applied to railroads. What we do here is we build a linear referencing system, not only on the rail data in the geographic view, but also the same measures are applied to the schematic view. That way, as you interact with a conventional map, the schematic map follows along. If you click on a station in the schematic view, the same station is selected in the regular map above. And because this is a web app, you don't have to wait to print the track charts for your folks to make use of them. Anyone with a web browser has the same view as everyone else. And as edits to the maps are applied, they're immediately viewable to everyone else or projected up onto a large control room screen, wherever these maps would be useful. Everyone's working with the same single source of truth. Lastly, at the bottom are a series of straight line diagrams, each line representing some quantity or quality along the track represented schematically. In this case, the topographic grade, speed limits, curves, train director assignments, these can all be managed here as point events and as linear events, and likewise shared with everyone who has read-only or read-write access to these maps. So as it relates to the system of engagement, everyone is just a few clicks away from the information that they need. This app has a very focused purpose, and it's all built using off-the-shelf configurable components. And for those who want to extend this web app further, ArcGIS has REST and JavaScript APIs for doing so.
Okay, so this next app is a creative combination of a few different off-the-shelf apps connected together to assist maintenance of way or MOW operations. MOW involves crews going out into the field with specialized technicians to inspect or to perform scheduled maintenance or perhaps unplanned repairs of things that break. This type of field work often requires the flag out or temporary closing of track so that this work can be done safely. And railroad folks know very well, MOW ops are inherently dangerous and at the same time pull directly against service levels and revenue, meaning when a track is down, trains aren't moving, and money isn't coming in. So let's use GIS to get more work done in less time, increasing both revenue and safety. When it comes to maintenance, normally you have a list of work to do, and you prioritize that list in order to do the most important things first. Now, this seems very reasonable, but in the case of rail maintenance, that cannot be the only criteria. It's arguable that the location of the maintenance work is at least as important as its priority. For example, if a high priority task requires a section of track be flagged out, there is value in finding other repair and inspection items in the area that also need work, even if those items are lower priority overall. What we see here are three different apps that work together. The first app on the left is called Workforce for ArcGIS. It's a web app used back at the office for the MOW manager to dispatch those work tasks to the field crews. All this work and a live status of each can be managed through this one single web page. This map that the dispatcher sees displays all of the upcoming work tasks and all the information about each one. When a high priority item is assigned for repair, we use GIS to do two things. First, we decide which section of track will need to be flagged out for work to occur. The dispatcher can see which switches need to be adjusted or where derailleurs need to be installed and can be marked on the map for all to see in real time. Secondly, the inventory of other MOW tasks that would need the same section of track flagged out can be selected, and the manager has the option of assigning these tasks to crews as well. I mean, if you're going to shut down a section of track for a high priority item, wouldn't it be better to fix 3 or 4 or maybe more other tasks at the same time? Connected to this dispatcher's view is a tablet app, say for an iPad or Android tablet, that each field supervisor brings to the field. And as progress is made, the supervisor is using the app to update the map view back at the office, including when the job is done. Finally, on the right is a read-only dashboard of everything that's going on. When a section of track is assigned for work, it's marked as dashed green so that all departments can see the work that's planned. That gives everyone in the organization the chance to jump on this flagged out track when it occurs. Now, when the track is closed, it's automatically changed to dash red so that everyone knows that there should be no movement on that track. And then when work is done and marked using the tablet app and approved by the manager, the red line is removed and everyone sees that this section of track is back in operation. When it comes to system of engagement, these are off-the-shelf apps configured to fit your data and operational standards, but using web services and simple designed views and dashboards so that everyone has the same live view, that same single source of truth. This last app I'd like to show is a bit simpler. It's basically a dashboard. In this case, there are several tracks that trains can use to arrive at or depart from a rail yard, which is part of a maritime port. If you mount video cameras near these tracks, Video of trains passing by can be used to build a deep learning model that recognizes trains, can count the cars, and can categorize those rail cars by type. For example, it can recognize whether a train car is a locomotive or a boxcar, or a tank or a hopper, or a flat car with containers, and so on. So that, given new video, the number of train cars and their types can be captured, can be displayed on a map and a dashboard, and can be stored in a database for analysis and reporting over time. Generally speaking, the more training data you have, the better and more accurately the model will perform. For example, for this particular model that created the video shown here in the bottom left, we labeled over 3,000 features on about 1,000 different images. This is an example of how artificial intelligence built right into ArcGIS can be used to automate tasks to a high degree of accuracy, freeing you up and freeing up your staff to spend more time doing other tasks. Thanks for your time to take a sneak peek at just some of the dozens, if not hundreds, of focused apps you can put to work using ArcGIS, off the shelf and configured to fit your needs. Back to you, Keith.
Okay, well, let's move on and talk about some key components of the system of engagement. Now, I first want to start with the destination. This is the place that people go to get to their maps, apps, and data. This is important because this is the tool, this is the method we use so that people can get to their information in 3 clicks or less. But it's more than just a destination for people to organize their data and their apps. It's also where the administrator can register content, whether that content's coming from internal to the organization or if it's third-party content. And it's also where we manage credentials. This allows us to control who sees what, who has access to certain data sets, who can utilize certain types of applications. So the destination is a key part of the system of engagement. Now, once again, I also want to hit on the applications or the apps themselves. And in this context, I want to compare them to building blocks. I think about a building block for a moment. When it's by itself, it's really simple to understand. But that building block is designed to be connected to other building blocks. And if you have enough of the right types of blocks, you can build a large and complex structure. Well, apps aren't all that different. Individual apps by themselves, they are simple to understand, easy to use. But when you connect these applications together, you can support a complex workflow with a lot of different stakeholders. Now, let me give you an example of what I mean by that. Here you see 2 applications that were stood up a few years ago by Florida DOT following Hurricane Irma. Now, a damage assessment on all the bridges was required as a result of that storm. So on the left-hand side, you see one application that was designed for the folks out in the field, the people going to the bridges and performing the damage assessment. The application on the right-hand side is an operations dashboard. This was built for folks back in the operations center so that they could understand what was happening across the state in terms of damage. They needed to understand the extent of the damage, and they needed information so they can make decisions about the recovery. Now, the folks in the field rather, they didn't need an operations dashboard. They needed a mobile app. And the people in the operations center, well, they didn't need a mobile app. They needed to be able to consolidate all this information. So these are 2 different apps for 2 different people or personas involved in a larger workflow. They're building blocks and they're connected together. In fact, when the people in the field hit the submit button on their mobile app, that information is immediately available for the folks in the operations center to interact with. Now, this assumes that the folks in the field are connected to a network, like a cell network or a Wi-Fi network. But if they're not, that information will get stored on the phone, and when they are connected, it will get pushed to the dashboard. So here, this is just one example of how we can take these individual apps to help people do their job better, but they're connected together so that we can support a larger and more complex workflow. So let's move on to the development of the SOE plan. And we've talked about the users, and the users need applications, and they go to a place to get to those applications, a destination. But how do we get there? Well, let's focus on the bottom part of this diagram. And we have existing business systems, and we want to build on those existing systems. After all, they have very valuable data in them that we want to take advantage of. Well, the way we get to that data and expose it or democratize it for use in the system of engagement, for use in the apps, is we build web services. Now, a web service is an IT term, but often when I'm in front of an audience that doesn't have a technical background, I'll use the analogy of Google to explain a web service, of a search engine. So let's just imagine for a moment that we go to google.com and we're interested in autonomous vehicles. So we type in autonomous vehicles and Google returns all of this information on our screen. Well, Google didn't download that information. What it did is it provided us a link to the source. So we can click on that link and go to the source to get more information about the subject of autonomous vehicles. Well, that's essentially what a web service is. We build this connection back into your existing business systems, and we expose the data in those systems for use in the apps. The great thing about those web services, though, is we can build them once and use them over and over again. So it's a great way to democratize the data in those existing systems and, again, help you get more value out of those investments that you've already made. Now, I want to put this to action and show you an actual plan on the next slide. But before I go there, I just want to warn you that this slide is busy. It's a bit of an eye chart. There are a lot of boxes on it. But if you bear with me, we can walk through it, and I think it will make some sense. So what you're looking at here is a summarized implementation plan for a system of engagement at New York State DOT. Now, as we look at this, let's focus in on this top row here. You can see these names like STIP Viewer and Filter and Safety Crash Analysis Viewer. These are apps. These are applications that we identified at New York State DOT. Folks said they need these applications to help them. Now, underneath each of these apps, these boxes, they represent work activities that need to be completed in order to make this first app operational. And you can see that we've taken these work activities and divided them up into different areas. So we have portal work and services work and data work and platform work. The idea, again, is we perform all of the technical work represented by these boxes, and when it's done, this first app is ready to go. We can move on to the next. Now let's hone in to a particular area on this chart. So this is the area I want to look at more closely, and there's a service. Now, for this first application, the STIP Viewer and Filter, we needed to build a service. We needed to expose data from an existing IT system. And you can see the lines on that box pointing upstream. That makes sense because we have to point back to the authoritative system. And also you see lines pointing downstream, which implies that, hey, this service is going to play a role in the future, not just on this app, but it's going to play a role on future applications. Let's just take a look at that. So there's that service with the red arrow, and let's take a look at the third application. Notice in the services tier, there is no work required for this third app. No services work required. The reason? We're going to use a service we already built. Now we can take this concept a step further, and if you look further downstream in this plan, and you look at all that white space for those last four apps, basically what this is telling us is that we're going to be reusing work that we've already done in order to deliver those next four apps. So this technology ecosystem that's required to support the system of engagement is being built incrementally as the applications are also being built and deployed incrementally. And this process reduces a lot of risk. Instead of making these large upfront investments on
systems and data. We build it one piece at a time, and we can make adjustments along the way as necessary in order to ensure that the technology work that we are doing is actually aligned with the needs of the users. When it comes to developing the system of engagement, there's three parts to this process, and this follows the Esri method. It's understand, plan, and act. We first need to understand what people need to do their job better, and we also need to understand what technology exists today. That's represented by the business track and technology track that you see here. Once we understand, we can build a plan. And once you have a plan, you can take action. Now I want to focus in on the understand and plan part of this process and talk a little bit more about the business and technical track. In the business track, we engage users. These are folks that are not technical. These are in lines of business, and we uncover their needs and translate those needs into applications. And you can see a whole list of different groups that we've talked with across all types of transportation organizations in the past. And we have found that every one of them have needs, and many times those needs for modern tools revolve around location, and GIS can really help meet those needs. Well, there's also a technical track, and this is where we do a deep dive on your existing systems. We want to understand how data is moving around your organization, what's in place today, what's integrated with what. And as we go through this process, as I said before, we develop a plan, and certainly it has technology recommendations, but it's more than a technology plan. It's a people, process, and technology plan. We provide recommendations around training, organizational structure, even some input on data governance. And most importantly of all, it's your plan. You can take this and do with it what you please when it comes to the implementation. You can use the plan to implement the system of engagement yourself. You can bring in some third parties, or of course you can use Esri to implement the system of engagement. So let's take a look at some case studies here. And I want to look at Colorado DOT and the process that we went through to develop their plan for the system of engagement. So you can see here we engaged a lot of people, about 200 people, had a lot of meetings, and really peeled back the onion on over 30 IT systems. Now, from that, we were able to develop 87 applications, 87 apps from folks across the organization. Now you might be asking yourself, what do we do with 87 apps? That's a lot. Well, it is, and we have to go through a prioritization process with them. And essentially what we do is we ask two questions about these applications. The first question is, what's the value of the application to the organization? Well, we don't answer that question. We can't answer that question. The customer, in this case, Colorado DOT, had to answer that question. So we presented these 87 apps to a core team, and that core team gave each of the apps a ranking on a 1 to 4 basis. 1 being low value, 4 being high value. The second question we asked was, how hard would it be to build each app? Well, Esri can answer that question, and we do. We look at those applications, and we understand what it's going to take in terms of the development of the application, how hard it's going to be to get to the data. Recall, we did a technical track, so we have all the information we need to give a rating on the level of effort for the app. And we do that rating on a 1 to 4 scale as well. So how valuable is the application, and how hard is it to build? Once we have those ratings for each of those questions, we can start to do some analysis. Now, I'm about to move to another slide here that is pretty busy again, but I think if you look at this as a whole, it'll make some sense. You don't need to read all of the text on this slide, but let me just tell you that these are all 87 applications that we identified at Colorado DOT. And we organized them in a certain way. So as you move out here, if you look at this blue axis, the x-axis, as you move out to the right, these applications out here and the columns to the right are harder to build than the applications back to the left. As we move up the green line here, the applications at the top of this matrix bring more value to the organization as compared to the applications toward the bottom. Now, in any project, you want to build some momentum and get people engaged. And one of the ways that we do that is we take a hard look at the apps in the upper left-hand corner. These are high value, low effort apps. So what that means is that these apps are relatively easy to deploy, and they're going to really move the dial for a lot of different individuals in the organization. So we focus in on this group of apps early in the implementation of the system of engagement. Now, I want to tie this concept back to that earlier chart that we looked at in terms of the New York State DOT summarized implementation plan. And these apps, we went through the same process. These applications here are the lower effort, higher value apps. And I want to make just one more point about the importance of this process and the benefit of this process. If we were to change the order of the applications here at the top, then all of the boxes down below would be reorganized. And remember, these boxes represent technology work activities that need to be completed in order to make the applications operational. Now, that's important because the work activities are tied to the app, and the app is tied to what the user said they need. So that means that we don't do technology work unless there's a purpose, unless it's going to benefit the end user. And this really helps us stay on track throughout the process by keeping the main thing the main thing. And the main thing here is the user and getting them tools that they need to help them in their day-to-day activities. Now, when it comes to timing and developing these plans, depending on the size of the organization, it's going to take about 14 weeks. It's not typically ever going to take any longer than 14 weeks, but this timeline could be compressed significantly for smaller organizations. But we do the interviews, both from a business perspective and a technical perspective. We go through the app ranking process, and then we write up the plan. So with all that said, let me just give you some closing thoughts on the system of engagement. As we have observed over the years, some challenges that GIS and IT folks have, we see a lot of different types of circumstances. And, we see situations where there's this tendency to build custom systems that are hard to maintain over time, that can't be upgraded. We see situations where information is scattered or locked up in these disparate systems. Some of our customers get in this cycle of just constantly rebuilding and redoing systems and throwing away old systems and bringing new ones in. In some cases, business and IT, the lines of business and the IT groups are completely disconnected, and they both go off in their own directions. Where business units just initiate their own projects and a lot of times try to leave IT and GIS out of the discussion. And when new applications are rolled out, oftentimes folks resist it. It's a change, and it's hard to accept that change. Well, we think the system of engagement addresses all of these challenges. We have hundreds of applications in the Esri stack, and there's a good chance you own many of them today if you're using Esri technology. And our approach is to configure first and customize second. Configure commercial off-the-shelf software, COTS apps. That means if they break, we're on the hook. for fixing it, not you. In terms of information, we organize it by location. And that's what helps to free up or democratize this data so folks can go to a map and they can see what's available to them at that particular location. We help you get more value, as I've said, out of your existing IT investments. And we've seen time and time again how instead of business units and IT being on different pages, they come together and really move the dial for the organization in terms of transforming it. And also the users, well, the applications that we identify, they're not our ideas. They're the users' ideas. They see their input, their ideas being put into action. They get invested in the process early and they stay involved throughout the whole process of the app development for the system of engagement. So I'll close with what I started with, the 3 key points about the system of engagement. This is what to remember about the system of engagement. We're delivering apps to help people do their job better. We want individuals to be able to get to the data they need from any device at any time in 3 clicks or less. And we're helping you increase the value of the investments you've already made in technology. So that's the system of engagement. I'd love to talk with you more about this approach and give you some more examples of the work that we've done to date. Here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me and have a great UC.